The station lights flickered above Kalara's head as she walked through the crowded marketplace. Her white fur stood out against the dark walls and the colorful clothing of other aliens. She pulled her cloak tighter, trying to hide herself. Behind her, 3 small cubs followed closely. They were hungry and tired, but they did not complain. Kalara was a Zathari, a species that looked like large cats that walked on 2 legs. Most Zathari had golden or brown fur with dark stripes. They were proud and strong. But Kalara was different. Her fur was pure white, and her eyes were pale blue. Among her people, this made her cursed. Her own family had turned her away. Her mate had left her and the cubs without looking back. She had traveled across the galaxy to reach Meridian Prime, hoping someone would help them. The station was huge, filled with traders and travelers from hundreds of worlds. Surely someone here would show kindness. The first place she tried was the Zathari embassy. A tall male with golden fur stood at the entrance. He wore expensive robes covered in metals. When Kalara approached, he looked at her white fur and his face twisted with disgust. "Please," Kalara said softly. "My cubs need food and shelter, just for a few days." The ambassador turned his back without saying a word. 2 guards stepped forward and blocked her path. One of them hissed at the cubs, making little Siva whimper and hide behind her mother's legs. Kalara left quickly, her heart heavy. But she had to keep trying. Next, she went to the Vren trading district. The reptilian merchants were known for their business sense. Surely they would see value in helping someone who could work for them. Kalara was strong and smart. She could earn her keep. An old Vren with dark green scales looked at her from behind his stall. "Go away, White One," he said loudly. "You bring bad luck. I will lose customers if you stay here." Other merchants nodded and pointed at the exit. Some made signs with their clawed hands that Kalara recognized as curses. Her middle cub, Toran, pressed close to her side. He was trying to be brave, but she could feel him shaking. The days passed and Kalara tried again and again. The Aquarians, who were usually kind to refugees, refused to help. They said that helping her would damage their relationship with the Zathari government. The Centaurian station security officer told her she had 48 hours to leave the station or she would be arrested. Kalara's credits were almost gone. She had enough for maybe 2 more meals. After that, she did not know what she would do. The cubs were getting weaker. Mira, the oldest, tried to act strong, but Kalara saw the fear in her daughter's eyes. Toran had stopped asking when they would find a home, and little Siva no longer played or laughed. On the second day, Kalara walked through the lower engineering decks of the station. This area was darker and dirtier. Pipes ran along the walls, and the air smelled like oil and metal. Few people came down here. Maybe she could find a quiet corner where they could rest for a while. Siva suddenly ran ahead, chasing a small floating robot that was carrying tools. The robot beeped and turned a corner. Siva giggled and followed it, disappearing from sight. "Siva!" Kalara called out, running after her cub. Mira and Toran rushed behind their mother. They found Siva in a small workshop. The room was cluttered with machine parts, tools, and half-repaired equipment. A human male was kneeling down, gently holding Siva's paw. He was wearing dirty work clothes and his hands were covered in grease. "Hey there, little one," the human said with a warm smile. "Are you lost?" Kalara froze in the doorway. She had heard of humans, but had never met one before. They were a relatively new species in this part of the galaxy. She did not know what to expect. The human looked up and saw her. He carefully released Siva's paw and stood up. He was not very tall for an adult, and his face had kind brown eyes. "Sorry about that," he said. "My maintenance drone likes to play with kids sometimes. I'm Jake Morrison, this is my repair shop." Kalara did not know what to say. She quickly bowed her head. "Forgive the interruption. We will leave now." But Jake noticed something. He saw how thin the cubs were. He saw the worn and dirty clothing. He saw the desperate look in Kalara's eyes. "Wait," he said. "Have you folks eaten today?" Kalara hesitated. Pride told her to say yes and leave, but the cubs needed food more than she needed pride. "No." she admitted quietly. Jake nodded. Come on in. I've got some food in the back. Nothing fancy, but it's filling. He led them to a small room behind the workshop. There was a table, a food heater, and some storage containers. Jake opened one and pulled out several packages of dried food and some fruit. It's not much, he said, but help yourselves. The cubs looked at their mother. Kalara wanted to refuse, but Siva's stomach growled loudly. She nodded, and the cubs rushed forward. Jake heated up the food and gave them each a portion. He also poured water into clean cups. While the cubs ate, Jake talked to Kalara. She told him about being rejected by everyone on the station. She did not mention why at first, but Jake seemed to understand without asking. I've got a storage room that's empty, Jake said after listening to her story. It's not big, but it's clean and warm. You and your kids can stay there for a while if you need to. Kalara stared at him. Why would you help us? You do not know us. Jake shrugged. Where I come from, we help people who need it. That's just what we do. But the others say I am cursed. They say my white fur brings misfortune. Jake looked at her white fur and then at her eyes. I think your fur is beautiful. And I don't believe in curses. I believe in people doing the right thing. For the first time in months, Kalara felt tears in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away. Thank you, she whispered. That night, Jake cleared out the storage room. He brought in some blankets and cushions. It was not much, but it was warm and safe. The cubs fell asleep almost immediately, their bellies full for the first time in days. Kalara sat by the door, watching the human work in his shop. She did not understand why he was helping them. Everyone else had turned them away. But this human, this Jake Morrison, had opened his door without hesitation. Maybe, she thought, there was hope after all. Outside the workshop, the station continued its endless noise and activity. But inside this small space, a family finally had shelter. And a friendship was beginning to form between two very different beings, who both understood what it meant to care about others. The next morning, Kalara woke up before the cubs. She stepped out of the storage room and found Jake already working. He was bent over a large machine, welding something with a bright blue torch. Sparks flew around him, but his hands were steady. Jake noticed her and turned off the torch. He lifted his protective mask and smiled. Morning. There's food in the heater if you're hungry. Kalara nodded her thanks. She watched him work for a moment, then said, I cannot stay here and do nothing. Let me help you. Jake looked surprised. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do, Kalara said firmly. You have given us food and shelter. I will not be a burden. I can work. Jake studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. Can you hand me that wrench over there? The big one. Kalara picked up the tool and gave it to him. As the morning went on, she helped him with various tasks. She held pieces in place while he welded them. She fetched tools when he needed them. She cleaned parts that were covered in grease. Jake noticed that Kalara was stronger than she looked. She could lift heavy equipment easily. Her hands were quick and precise. When she worked on delicate electronics, her fingers moved with perfect control. You're good at this, Jake said during a break. Have you done repair work before? On my homeworld, I worked in the maintenance sector, Kalara explained. Before they discovered my cubs were also albino. After that, no one would hire me, Jake frowned. That's stupid, judging someone by their fur color instead of their skills. Kalara looked at him curiously. Does your species not have such divisions? Jake laughed, but it was a sad sound. Oh, we had them. For a long time, humans treated each other terribly because of skin color, or where they were born or who they loved. We had wars over it. Millions died. But eventually we learned. We decided that those differences didn't matter. What mattered was how people treated each other. And now all humans think this way? Kalara asked. Most of us, Jake said. There are still some who haven't learned. But as a species, we decided that kindness and fairness were more important than old prejudices. The cubs woke up and came into the workshop. Mira immediately walked over to watch Jake work. She was fascinated by the tools and machines. Torin sat quietly in a corner, reading something on Jake's old tablet that the human had given him. Siva played with the maintenance drone, laughing as it beeped and spun in circles. A customer arrived around midday. He was a centaurian with blue skin and 4 arms. He brought a broken navigation computer. Can you fix this? The Centaurian asked. Then he saw Kalara and his eyes widened. You have a white Zithari working here? I do, Jake said calmly. Is that a problem? The Centaurian hesitated. I heard they bring bad luck. Well, I don't believe in luck, Jake replied. I believe in good work. Do you want your computer fixed or not? The Centaurian thought about it, then nodded. How long will it take? Jake examined the device. About 3 hours. Maybe 4. Make it 3 and I'll pay extra, the Centaurian said, placing the computer on the workbench. After the customer left, Jake and Kalara worked together on the navigation computer. Jake showed her how the human-made components connected to the alien technology. Kalara showed him a faster way to access the damaged circuits using her smaller hands and sharp claws. They finished the repair in 2.5 hours. When the Centaurian returned, he was impressed. He paid the full amount plus the bonus and even left a tip. You two work well together, he said before leaving. Maybe that luck thing is nonsense after all. As the days passed, more customers came. Word spread that Jake's shop did quality work quickly. Some customers were uncomfortable seeing Kalara at first, but they always left satisfied. The money started coming in more steadily. Jake bought more food and some new clothes for the cubs. He found educational programs on his tablet for them to learn. Mira absorbed everything like a sponge, constantly asking questions about how things worked. Torin became interested in laws and rules, wanting to understand how different species govern themselves. Siva was the artist, drawing pictures of the station and the people she saw, but not everyone was happy about the arrangement. One evening, a large Zithari male entered the workshop. He had golden fur with black stripes and wore expensive clothing. His eyes were cold and angry. You are Jake Morrison? He asked. That's me, Jake replied, standing up from his work. What can I do for you? I am Vexer, captain of the trade vessel Golden Claw. I have heard that you are harboring defective Zithari in your establishment. Jake's face hardened. I'm providing shelter to a family that needed help. There's nothing defective about them. Vexer's tail lashed back and forth, a sign of anger among his species. You do not understand our ways, human. The white ones weaken our species. They must be removed from the gene pool. Well, human ways say that everyone deserves a chance to live, Jake said. His voice was calm but firm. And this is my shop on a mixed species station. Your ways don't apply here. Vexer stepped closer, trying to intimidate Jake with his size. You will regret this decision. Bad things happen to those who defy Zithari tradition. Is that a threat? Jake asked, not backing down. It is a warning, Vexer said. He looked past Jake and saw Kalara standing in the doorway with the cubs behind her. You cannot hide forever, White One. Eventually you will be brought to justice. After Vexer left, Jake locked the workshop door. Kalara was shaking slightly. I should leave, she said quietly. I am bringing danger to you. No, Jake said firmly. You're not going anywhere. That bully doesn't scare me. But he has power and connections, Kalara said. He can make your life very difficult, Jake smiled. Then let him try. I'm not abandoning you and your kids because some jerk doesn't like how you look. That's not who I am. That's not who humans are. Mira walked up to Jake and hugged his leg. Thank you for protecting us, she said in her small voice. Jake patted her head gently. That's what friends do, kid. That night after the cubs were asleep, Kalara and Jake talked for a long time. She told him about her home world, about the beauty of the crystal forests and the singing caves. She told him about her mate, who had been kind until their first cub was born with white fur. She told him about the shame her family felt, and how they had asked her to leave the planet. Jake listened to everything without interrupting. When she finished, he said, My grandmother used to say that you can judge a person's character by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Your family failed that test, but you passed it by protecting your cubs and refusing to abandon them. I am their mother, Kalara said simply. What else could I do? You'd be surprised, Jake replied. Not everyone has that kind of strength. As the station's artificial night cycle continued, both of them felt that something important was happening. A friendship was growing between them, built on mutual respect and shared values. But they also both knew that challenges lay ahead. Vexer's visit was just the beginning. Outside, in the dark corridors of the station, forces were already moving against them. 2 weeks passed and the workshop became busier than ever. Clara and Jake worked as a perfect team. She could reach into small spaces that were too tight for him. He understood the complex electrical systems that confused her. Together, they solved problems that would have taken either of them much longer alone. The cubs settled into a routine. Mira spent her mornings learning about engineering from watching Jake and her mother work. Torin studied the station's rules and laws on Jake's tablet. Siva drew pictures and sometimes helped organize the tools by size and type. Other humans on the station started visiting the workshop. They came to get repairs done, but they also came to meet Kalara and the cubs. Most of them were friendly and curious. They brought small gifts for the children and shared stories about Earth. One visitor was an older human woman named Betty, who ran a clothing shop 3 levels up. She brought fabric and made new clothes for the cubs, measuring them carefully and choosing colors that Mira, Torin, and Siva liked. Every child should have clothes that fit properly, Betty said, pinning fabric around Siva. And every child should feel special. Another regular visitor was Carl, a human engineer who worked on the station's main power systems. He and Jake became friends, and Carl often stopped by to share technical knowledge or bring food. "You're doing good work here," Carl told Jake one evening, both with the repairs and with helping that family. But not everyone approved. The Zithari community on the station grew increasingly hostile. Groups of golden-furred Zithari would stand outside the workshop, staring and making threatening gestures. Some of Jake's former customers stopped coming because they did business with Zithari traders and did not want to upset them. One day, Jake found threatening symbols painted on his workshop door. They were Zithari curses warning of death and disaster. He cleaned them off without telling Kalara, but she saw the paint stains and knew what had happened. The situation got worse when the cubs went out to explore the station. Jake had told them they could visit the observation deck on level 12 if they stayed together. The 3 of them walked through the corridors, excited to see the stars. On their way back, a group of young Zithari males blocked their path. There were 5 of them, all with golden and brown fur. They were teenagers, old enough to be dangerous but young enough to be cruel. "Look at the white freaks," one of them said, laughing. "They walk around like they're normal." Mira stepped in front of her siblings. "Leave us alone. We have done nothing to you." "Your existence is an insult," another Zithari teen said. "You make our species look weak." Torin pulled out Jake's communication device, the one the human had given them for emergencies. But before he could press the button, one of the Zithari knocked it out of his hand. It clattered across the floor. Siva started crying. The Zithari teens laughed and made scary faces at her. "Maybe we should teach you a lesson," the leader said, stepping closer to Mira. "Show you what happens to defects who don't know their place." But then a voice called out, "Hey, what's going on here?" It was Carl, the engineer. He walked up quickly, his face serious. Behind him were 2 other humans. "These kids bothering you?" Carl asked the cubs. The Zithari teens stepped back. They outnumbered the humans, but humans had a reputation for being unpredictable in fights. They were not as strong as Zithari, but they were tough and did not give up easily. "We were just talking," the Zithari leader said. "Didn't look like talking to me," Carl said. "Looked like 5 big guys threatening 3 little kids. That's not cool in any language." The Zithari teens looked at each other, then decided to leave. As they walked away, the leader turned back and said, "This is not over, White Ones. You cannot hide behind humans forever." Carl picked up the communication device and handed it back to Toran. "You kids okay?" Mira nodded, trying to be brave, but her voice shook when she said, "Thank you for helping us." Carl walked them back to the workshop and told Jake what happened. Jake was angry, angrier than Kalara had ever seen him. "This has to stop," Jake said. He contacted station security and filed an official complaint. The security officer was the same Centaurian who had told Kalara to leave the station weeks ago. He looked at the complaint without much interest. "This is a cultural matter between Zithari," he said. "Station security does not interfere in cultural matters." "Cultural matter?" Jake said, his voice rising. 5 teenagers threatened 3 small children. "That's not culture, that's bullying," the officer shrugged. "I will note your complaint in the record. But I advise you to keep the albino Zithari away from normal Zithari to avoid future incidents." Jake left the security office frustrated and worried. That night he talked to Carl and Betty and several other humans about the situation. "The station administration won't help," Jake said. "They're too worried about offending the Zithari embassy." "Then we help," Betty said simply. "We make sure those kids are never alone. We make sure Kalara and her family are protected. The Zithari won't like that, Carl warned. I don't care what they like, Betty replied. What they're doing is wrong and we all know it. Over the next few days, the human community on Meridian Prime organized themselves. They created a schedule to make sure someone always walked the cubs when they went out. Human shop owners put up signs saying all species welcome in their windows. Some of them were friends with Jake, but others were strangers who just believed it was the right thing to do. The Zithari noticed the change. Ambassador Draxon called a meeting with the station administrator, complaining about human interference in Zithari affairs. The humans are protecting criminals, Draxon said. The albino female broke our laws by leaving our homeworld. She and her offspring should be returned for judgment. The station administrator, whose name was Garen, listened carefully. He was a smart politician who understood the complicated situation. Humans were becoming more important in galactic trade. Their ships carried valuable goods and their colonies were growing. Offending them could have serious economic consequences. I will speak with the human community leaders, Garen said diplomatically. Perhaps we can find a solution that satisfies everyone. But finding such a solution would prove to be very difficult. Meanwhile, Vexer had not forgotten about Jake and Kalara. He watched the workshop from a distance, planning something. The white Zithari and the interfering human would learn their lesson soon. He just needed the right opportunity. That opportunity came in the form of a business proposal. Vexer contacted Jake through official channels, offering him a large amount of money for a special repair job. It was legitimate work, or at least it appeared to be. Jake was suspicious, but the money was significant. It would be enough to expand the workshop and buy better equipment. It would also help him save up credits for Kalara and the Cubs' future. I do not trust him, Kalara said when Jake told her about the offer. Neither do I, Jake admitted. But if it's a real job, we could use the money. And if it's a trap, well, I'll be ready for it. Kalara felt uneasy, but she trusted Jake's judgment. She just hoped that his human optimism would not lead him into danger that he could not handle. Jake prepared for the job carefully. The work order said he needed to repair the navigation system on a private yacht, docked in the restricted section of the station. It was owned by a wealthy merchant who was supposedly in a hurry to leave. Before he left, Jake made sure Kalara and the Cubs were safe in the workshop. He locked the doors and gave Kalara a security code that would alert Carl and Betty if there was trouble. I will be back in a few hours, Jake said. If anything feels wrong, use the code immediately. Kalara nodded, but her instincts told her something bad was going to happen. She watched Jake leave, feeling helpless. The private dock was far from the main corridors. Jake walked through the quiet passages, his tool bag over his shoulder. When he arrived at the dock, he found it empty. There was no yacht, no crew, nothing. Jake realized too late that it was a trap. Vexer stepped out from behind a storage container along with 4 other Zithari males. They were all large and looked ready for violence. Hello, human, Vexer said with a cold smile. We need to have a conversation about your poor choices. Jake dropped his tool bag and raised his hands. If you wanted to talk, you could have just called. This is not a conversation, Vexer said. This is a lesson. The Zithari surrounded Jake. He was a decent fighter, but he was one human against 5 trained Zithari warriors. The fight was brutal and short. Jake managed to hit one of them hard enough to break the alien's nose, but the others overwhelmed him quickly. They beat him with controlled violence, making sure to cause pain without killing him. When Jake fell to the ground, Vexer leaned down close to his face. Tell the white ones to leave this station, Vexer said quietly. Tell them that human protection means nothing here. If you interfere again next time, we will not be so gentle. They left Jake lying on the cold dock floor, bleeding and barely conscious. Back at the workshop, Kalara grew more worried as the hours passed. Jake should have returned by now. Something was wrong. She could feel it. She checked Jake's computer and found the address of the job. Her heart sank when she saw it was in the restricted section. That was a dangerous area where security rarely patrolled. Kalara made a decision. She told Mira to watch over Toran and Siva, and to lock the door behind her. Then she left the workshop, moving quickly through the station. Finding the private dock took time. Kalara had to avoid security cameras and Zithari patrols. Her white fur made her easy to spot, so she stayed in the shadows and used maintenance tunnels. When she finally reached the dock, she found Jake lying motionless on the floor. For a terrible moment, she thought he was dead, but then she saw his chest moving slightly. He was breathing. Kalara rushed to his side. Jake's face was bruised and bloody. His arm was bent at a wrong angle, probably broken. There were cuts and marks all over his body. "Jake," she whispered, gently touching his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Jake's eyes opened slightly. He tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound. Kalara looked around. She could not carry him through the main corridors. There were too many people who would ask questions, and station security might arrest them both. She needed to use the maintenance tunnels. Using her Zithari strength, Kalara carefully lifted Jake. He was heavy, but she was stronger than she looked. She carried him through the tunnels, taking the longest route to avoid detection. Every step was difficult, and Jake groaned in pain, but she did not stop. It took over an hour to get back to the workshop. When Kalara finally arrived, she used her security code to open the door. Mira gasped when she saw Jake's condition. "Get the medical supplies," Kalara ordered, "and bring all the clean cloth we have." Kalara laid Jake on the workbench and began treating his injuries. She had basic medical knowledge, but these wounds were serious. She cleaned the cuts and bandaged them. She made a splint for his broken arm using metal rods and tape. She gave him water and pain medication from the emergency kit. The cubs watched silently, scared but trying to help. Siva held Jake's hand gently, tears running down her face. As Kalara worked, she felt anger building inside her. Jake had done nothing wrong. He had only shown kindness to her and her cubs, and this was how the world repaid him. Carl arrived the next morning for his regular visit. When he saw Jake's condition, his face went pale. "What happened?" he demanded. Kalara told him everything. Carl listened, his expression growing darker with each word. "That's assault," Carl said. "That's a serious crime. We need to report this." "Station security will do nothing," Kalara said bitterly. "They will call it a cultural matter and ignore it." Carl pulled out his communication device. "Maybe station security won't care, but the human community will. And we have connections that go beyond this station." Within hours, the news spread through the entire human population on Meridian Prime. The workshop filled with visitors. Betty brought more medical supplies. Other humans brought food and offered to help guard the workshop. A human woman named Lisa Hayes arrived in the afternoon. She was the captain of a trading ship called the Wanderer. She had a reputation for being tough and fair. "I heard what happened," Lisa said, looking at Jake's injuries. "This crosses a line. We cannot let this stand. What can we do?" Kalara asked. "The Zithari are powerful here. They have money and political influence," Lisa smiled grimly. "So do humans. We might be newer to this part of the galaxy, but we are not weak, and we take care of our own." Lisa made several calls using her ship's long-range communication system. She contacted human trade representatives, colonial administrators, and even some Earth government officials. She explained the situation and asked for support. The response was immediate and strong. Human traders threatened to stop doing business with Meridian Prime. Human colonies said they would divert their ships to other stations. Earth's diplomatic service sent an official protest to the station administrator. Administrator Garen found himself in a difficult position. The Zithari were angry about human interference, but the humans were now threatening serious economic consequences. The station could not afford to lose human business. Garen called for an emergency tribunal to investigate the attack on Jake. He also issued a statement saying that all residents of the station were protected under station law, regardless of species or appearance. Ambassador Draxon was furious. He demanded that Kalara and her cubs be deported immediately. He claimed that they were the cause of all the trouble. But the human delegation, led by Lisa Hayes, demanded justice for Jake first. They also demanded protection for Kalara's family under refugee laws. The situation was turning into a major diplomatic crisis. What had started as one human helping one family was now involving governments and trade agreements. Jake regained consciousness 2 days after the attack. His first words were asking if Kalara and the cubs were safe. When Kalara told him yes, he smiled despite the pain. "Good," he whispered. "That is all that matters." Kalara held his hand gently. "You are a fool, Jake Morrison. You nearly died for us." "Worth it," Jake said simply. Outside the workshop, forces were gathering on both sides. The tribunal would begin soon, and its outcome would determine not just the fate of one family, but the future of human Zithari relations in this sector of space. The tribunal was held in the main administrative chamber of Meridian Prime. The room was large and circular, with seats arranged in tiers around a central platform. Representatives from dozens of species attended, either in person or through holographic projection. Administrator Garen sat at the highest seat, acting as judge. To his right was Ambassador Draxon of the Zithari. To his left was Lisa Hayes, representing the human community. Jake insisted on attending despite his injuries. He wore a support brace for his broken arm and moved slowly, but he refused to stay in the workshop. Kalara and the cub sat with him in the section reserved for witnesses. The tribunal began with Garen explaining the purpose of the hearing. We are here to investigate the assault on Jake Morrison and to determine the status of the Zithari refugees under his protection. This matter has implications for station law and interspecies relations. Ambassador Draxon spoke first. He was tall and dignified in his formal robes. The human Jake Morrison has interfered in Zithari internal affairs. The albino female Kalara is a criminal who fled our homeworld, violating our laws. Her offspring carry genetic defects that threaten the purity of our species. We demand their immediate return to face judgment. Lisa Hayes stood up. Jake Morrison is a station resident who provided humanitarian aid to refugees. Helping people in need is not interference. It is basic decency. As for the attack on him, we have evidence that it was planned and executed by Vexer and his associates. That is assault, which is illegal under station law. The tribunal reviewed security footage that Carl had obtained from the maintenance tunnels. The footage showed Vexer and his men waiting at the empty dock. It showed them attacking Jake. The evidence was clear. Vexer was brought before the tribunal in restraints. He looked angry but said nothing. Then it was Jake's turn to speak. He stood up slowly, wincing from the pain. I met Kalara and her cubs when they were desperate, Jake said, his voice steady despite his injuries. They were hungry, homeless, and scared. Everyone had turned them away because of their fur color. I helped them because it was the right thing to do. I would do it again without hesitation. Jake looked directly at Ambassador Draxon. You call them defective. I call them people. Good people. Kalara is one of the best workers I have ever known. Her cubs are smart, kind, and brave. The only defect I see is in a society that judges people by their appearance instead of their character. The chamber was silent. Many of the alien observers shifted uncomfortably. Some had their own histories of discrimination and prejudice. Then something unexpected happened. Mira stood up. May I speak? She asked in her young voice. Garen looked surprised but nodded. You may approach the platform. Mira walked forward, her white fur bright under the chamber lights. She was small and young, but she held her head high. My name is Mira, she said. I'm 8 years old. People say I am defective because my fur is white. They say I make my species weak. But I do not understand why. I can think. I can learn. I can work. I love my mother and my siblings. How does that make me defective? She looked around at all the adults watching her. Jake Morrison did not see my fur color. He saw that we needed help and he helped us. Is that not what good people do? Is that not what civilization means? The simplicity and honesty of her words struck many in the audience. Even some of the Zithari representatives looked uncomfortable. Ambassador Draxon tried to respond, but Garen held up his hand. Let the child finish, Mira continued, her voice growing stronger. We did not choose to be born with white fur. We did not choose to be hated. But we choose to be kind. We choose to work hard. We choose to be good. If that is not enough, then the problem is not with us. She walked back to her seat and Kalara pulled her close, tears in her eyes. Lisa Hayes stood again. The human delegation has done research on Zithari history. With the tribunal's permission, I would like to present our findings. Garen nodded and Lisa activated a holographic display. Images appeared showing ancient Zithari texts and artwork. These are historical records from your own species, Lisa said, looking at the Zithari representatives. They show that albino Zithari were once respected in your society. They served as spiritual leaders and advisors. The discrimination against them is relatively recent, only about 300 years old. It started as political propaganda during a civil war and was maintained afterward through cultural pressure. Lisa pulled up more images. We also found evidence that albino Zithari are not genetic defects at all. They are a natural variation that appears in roughly 1% of births. Suppressing them does not strengthen your species. It weakens your genetic diversity. Ambassador Draxon's face darkened. These are lies and distortions. These are facts from your own historical archives, Lisa replied calmly. Available to anyone who bothers to look. The revelation caused chaos in the chamber. Many species started talking at once. The Zithari representatives argued among themselves. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry. Garen called for order. After the chamber quieted down, he spoke. This tribunal will now make its judgment. He looked at Vexer. You and your associates are found guilty of assault. You will serve time in station detention and pay compensation to Jake Morrison. When your sentence is complete, you will be banned from Meridian Prime for 10 years. Vexer snarled, but security officers held him firmly. Garen then looked at Ambassador Draxon. As for the status of Kalara and her cubs, this tribunal grants them protected refugee status. They may remain on this station under the protection of station law. Any attempt to harm them or forcibly remove them will be treated as a criminal act. Draxon stood up angrily. This is an outrage. You cannot interfere in Zithari affairs. I just did, Garen said firmly. This is a mixed species station governed by universal laws. Those laws protect all residents, regardless of their origin or appearance. If the Zithari government disagrees, they are welcome to take their business elsewhere. The tribunal ended with mixed reactions. The humans were pleased. Many other species supported the decision. But the Zithari were divided. Some supported their ambassador. Others quietly agreed with the tribunal's ruling. In the days that followed, things changed on Meridian Prime. Station security updated their policies to protect residents from cultural persecution. Several other albino Zithari who had been hiding came forward, asking for the same protections that Kalara received. Jake recovered slowly but fully. His workshop became famous across the sector. People came from other stations just to get repairs done by the human and Zithari team. Kalara became an official partner in the business. They expanded into a larger space and hired more workers. The cubs continued their education, growing stronger and more confident every day. One evening, 6 months after the tribunal, Jake and Kalara sat outside the workshop watching the ships come and go through the station's docking ports. Do you ever regret helping us? Kalara asked quietly. Jake smiled. Never, not even once. But you suffered because of it. You were hurt. You lost customers, you made enemies. I also gained a family, Jake said. I gained friends. I learned that standing up for what is right is always worth the cost. Kalara looked at him with gratitude and respect. Humans are strange beings. You are not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but you have something special. What is that? Jake asked. Hope, Kalara said. You always believe things can get better. And somehow when humans are involved, they often do. Inside the workshop, the three cubs were working on a project together. Mira was designing something on the computer. Turan was calculating measurements. Siva was drawing decorative patterns. They were making a sign for the workshop. It would hang above the door for everyone to see. The sign read, Morrison and Kalara Engineering. All species welcome. Word of their story spread throughout the galaxy. On the Zithari homeworld, young albinos heard about Kalara and her cubs. They heard about the human who stood up for them. They heard that things could be different. A movement began slowly but steadily. Albino Zithari started demanding equal rights. Some families began protecting their white-furred children instead of hiding them. The old prejudices were being challenged. It would take time, maybe generations, for real change to happen. But the seed had been planted. And it started with one simple act of compassion by a human mechanic who refused to turn away a family in need. Jake Morrison never considered himself a hero. He was just a repair worker trying to do the right thing. But sometimes doing the right thing is the most heroic act of all. And in a galaxy filled with countless species and cultures, sometimes it takes an outsider to remind everyone of a simple truth. That kindness, compassion, and fairness should be universal values, not limited by species or appearance. The story of Jake and Kalara became a legend in that sector of space. Parents told it to their children. Teachers used it in schools. Diplomats referenced it in negotiations. It was proof that one person could make a difference. That standing up against injustice mattered. That humanity, for all its flaws and youth as a spacefaring species, had something valuable to offer the galaxy. They had learned from their mistakes. They had chosen compassion over hate. They had decided that everyone deserved dignity and respect, and they were willing to fight for those principles even when it cost them dearly.